Good morning, folks, and welcome to day 3 of the Decolonizing Economics Summit from Earth Day to May Day. My name is Tony Savaggio, and I'm very excited to welcome you to this session today on art and activism, where we're going to examine the role of art and culture in building a post-capitalist society. Before we get underway, I want to give a big shout out to our community radio station, People Powered KMUD. We have the honor of being simulcast live at KMUD. So if you're in the KMUD listenership and not a member now, jump online and send them some dead presidents to help keep this community radio station going. It's people's radio at the finest. I also want to give a shout out to our good friends at Free Speech TV, the most progressive TV network in the nation, who's also broadcasting this summit on video. Gratitude to both for making this panel and the entire conference accessible to a wider audience. That said, because this is live, I'm going to ask the audience members and panelists to not drop the 7 dirty words that you really want to say in the discussion. If you do, drop them in the chat, and that will help keep the heat off our good friends here who are broadcasting this live. So we're going to kick off this panel on art and activism, where we're going to examine the role of art and culture in building a post-capitalist society. Toni Cade Bambara famously said, "The role of the artist is to make revolution irresistible." That's because art offers powerful opportunities to express ourselves, to challenge assumptions, to initiate conversation, and to connect and to inspire. Deeper still, there's never been a successful revolution that did not have artists and culture workers expressing their ideas, their grievances, their demands. In this session, we're going to engage with some incredible folks, a diverse group of artists and culture workers, and we're going to talk about the role of art and culture in activism and in decolonization. So we have wonderful folks here who I'd like to introduce. Some of these folks I've known for years, working with them on environmental, labor, global justice, humanitarian, refugee work, while others I know from their participation in this conference in previous years. I think Michelle and Kwame, they're rocking 3 years with us at the Post-Capitalist Summit. So I'm going to do a short introduction of each of the panelists here. And after all of the introductions, we're going to give folks about 10 minutes to tell us a little bit more about themselves, what it is they do, why they do it, and how they use art as a tool for social change. So this will be followed by a series of guided questions that I'll ask the group to answer. And then we'll have about 15 minutes or so to take some questions from the audience and via chat. So that said, I want to introduce each of our wonderful guests. The first is Michelle Hernandez. Michelle is a Wiyot and Latina filmmaker, grew up on the Table Bluff Reservation, where she found her love for filmmaking. She's got a master's in film and electronic media at American University in Washington, D.C., and a BA at Humboldt State, now Cal Polytech Humboldt, in both film and Native American studies. Much of her work focuses on the importance of culture, traditions, and identity, as well as dealing with indigenous subjects. With her work, she gives voice to stories that aren't often told. She's the co-founder of Sugar Brush Hill Productions, which she currently runs with her partner, Richie Wensler. And her latest work includes Dauk and the Bartow Project. It's an honor to have Michelle here again for the third appearance at the summit. Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to introduce Kwame Braxton. Kwame is a visual artist and a digital fabrication, as well as a native of Jackson, Mississippi. Some of his early work can be found circa 2015 with his first published comic strip, God of Kings. His intent in creating this issue was to create awareness of ancient civilizations that represent his demographic and educate the youth within his community about historical references they may not find in their current public school. He's the son of a mother who's a principal cellist and a father who's a prestigious hip-hop journalist and playwright. Safe to say that artistry and creativity are well within his gene pool. He's gone on to host workshops at Jackson State for the youth, partake in multiple beautification projects around the inner city where he resides. And Kwame's main passion is in digital illustration as well as traditional painting. Um, he believes it is the artist's job to captivate and reiterate the climate and mindset of people within their era for the future to unpack and learn from. Our third guest is Sakura Saunders, is an environmental justice organizer and arts educator. She's the co-founder of the Mining Injustice Solidarity Network in Toronto and has been a storyteller with the Beehive Design Collective since 2008. The Beehive Design Collective is a widely motivated, all-volunteer activist arts collective dedicated to cross-pollinating the grassroots by creating collaborative, anti-copyright images for use as educational and organizing tools. I've seen their cross-pollination work firsthand with the global justice movement events and on our campus. So welcome, Sakura. Dana Lyons is a singer-songwriter best known for his hit comedy song Cows with Guns. And I actually have a signed copy, Dana. I don't know if you can see that, of your poster. May not show well. Let's see, that doesn't show on my screen, but it says Dana Lyons Cows with Guns. Um, uh, it reached #2 on the Australian country charts, and was on Ireland's top 40 for over 6 months. It shows how behind American music is, Dana. Dana's a longtime environmental and social justice activist and toured raising money and awareness for many causes that he's going to talk about. He brings together a mix of comedy, ballads, and love songs. His sharp wit and beautiful voice have him performing at concert halls, festivals, conventions, fundraisers, universities around the world. You toured 46 of 50 states, maybe more since I've read this last. East coast of Australia, Ireland, England, New Mexico, Kazakhstan, Siberia, and more. Thanks, Dana, for joining us. And then lastly, Chris O'More is a visual and performance artist, musician, and writer. A little bit of a lot in between. His art may, on the one side, be described as art for the sake of art, for the sake of beauty of nature, in the landscape, or the small details of still life, emotions in matters of love and joy, but also in the darker side of that same life. This may be in the form of song or text, an oil painting, his poetry and installation, performance, or a little bit of this all mixed together. In meeting O'More, I've known Chris for a number of years, met them in a different incarnation back in the early 2015, doing refugee work on Lesbos. His social and concept art, intersectionality is an important term to have in mind with his art, and his expressions are often characterized by the crossroads between politics, gender, religion, exclusion, poverty, wealth, hierarchies of power, striving to crush the myths and narratives that we all too often allow to control our lives and attitudes towards both ourselves and others. So thank you all for joining us in this panel. I'm going to start with folks that have been here before, Kwame and Michelle, and I'll start with Michelle. Could you maybe tell, and I'm going to ask this for each of the panelists, tell a little bit, the audience a little bit more about yourself. What is the art and culture work you do, attempt to do, and yeah, your arc.
Yeah, hawala di code Michelle Hernandez, yo Saletlak, yo Toa and Riyadh Dali, yo Los Angeles, yo da Los Angeles. Hi, my name is Michelle. I am a Saletlak speaking person. I am also I'm from Northern California. My people reside from what is now known as Eel River and Toa Island that can be found in the center of the Bay of Eureka. And I currently reside in Los Angeles, and I'm really happy to be here. Like earlier, I'm a filmmaker, that kind of happened to find my way into creating art that makes statements. Originally, I just wanted to make some random stuff. Somehow I've entered into this type of art. I want to share some of my work from the beginning to what I'm doing now. Let me just see if I can figure out how to share my screen. And I can start with that.
Irene, it's very important that Wanda and you get as far away from him as you can.
I will.
It's still very important that Wanda does not find out. She can't know that those stories are real. Okay, it's time for sleep.
I will not let them take us.
Go find it, please. Jack. Jack.
Vi Guy Wash, Claire, Biwa, Rupkap, Sila, Uguwenu, Twa, Kwao.
Well, I think what was the catalyst is that part of it came up for sale. 1.5 acres came up for sale. The tribal council at the time was fabulous. They said, let's do it. And I said, okay, now that I open my mouth, what do I do? Yeah. So we start with Indian tacos, and then we went to T-shirts and posters and trying to raise the money, and then put a panel together, and it was I and two others on the panel down in Palm Springs. And so we were trying to raise the money. It was $90,000. If we didn't get it in the right time, it would go to $100,000. And if we didn't get it in that time, it would go to $106,000. We ended up having to pay $106,000 for the 1.5 acres of Tuluwat. And that was exciting.
When Cheryl Seidner was like, I'm going to get Tuluwat back, people told her that that was impossible. They flat out said to her that that would be impossible. And she was like, no, don't worry about it. I'll get it back. And she works, right? She does bake sales and sells t-shirts and like the most organic thing that you can think of, but with the constant sort of like saying, I'm going to get Tuluwat back. And everybody keeps thinking that it's never going to happen. And then you fast forward years later and there we are, and they're giving it back. And I think there's an impossible thing made possible.
Like I mentioned earlier, I went to Cal Poly to receive my, BA in film and Native studies, and I thought I would just be making films about Native people. Oftentimes we don't have that representation. Little did I know my career would lead to activism in a weird way. Just making representation in itself, I feel, is activism in filmmaking. Telling our stories is activism. Being true to who we are is a way. And so that's how I led into filmmaking. I created my first book, which was about the boarding school experience for children and their families. We always hear about these stories in our community. And at the time I was living in Washington, D.C. And it was surprising because I was a nanny trying to tell people about this film I was making. And I had asked, do you know about the Native boarding school experience? And I got a lot of no's. And this is like in our capital. So it basically became a history lesson. Little did I know that was going to happen too, in a way. And so I wanted to create this movie because there's a lot of docs out there that cover a lot of the things that happened to our Native people, but oftentimes we are seeing kind of in the past and not in the present. We're still here. Obviously, I'm sitting in this chair. I'm speaking to you guys. I wanted people to know that we were just families too, dealing with these things and all of these like atrocities that were happening to us, and trying to protect our family as well as trying to be a family. And it focuses on a young girl, and she's just trying to be this young person, but also having to deal with the idea of protecting her sister. And that's kind of what led to telling these stories. I've been able to tell stories about my identity and my uncle Rick Bartow, and the dance and the animation pieces are about him. The animation I related a lot to because at the same time as him, we were bringing back our traditions in my tribe, and I was also a young person, so I was trying to understand who I was. And so that was it's kind of a love letter to my uncle and myself and my community about the revitalization of who we are and the reclaiming of ourselves. And then my last piece is Tuluwat Reclaimed, which I just completed a couple of months ago. We're currently going around film festival circuits to share this story. We are the first, if you guys don't know, we are the first in the United States to receive land back. And so I knew I would eventually tell this story. I didn't think it'd be this soon, but I was really honored to be able to tell that story and to say all of that. Traditionally, I never saw myself as a storyteller. I thought I was just a filmmaker, but I realized I am a storyteller. In Native communities, we are oral storytellers. And then I realized I kind of just mixed it up and used filmmaking as a way to share that around the world about my people and use it as activism. But I can ramble on. I'm going to stop and pass it on.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your arc and those powerful images and histories, and documenting so beautifully and importantly, like the experiences of your communities. And Cheryl Seidner, who in '95, when I was a student, she came into a class, Sam Oliner's class, and talked about her efforts to get land back and the powerful story of the land back movement. I really look forward to seeing the documentary. Really do. Thanks again. I'm going to open it up to Kwame and ask same sort of question. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, art, culture, work you do, your arc, etc. So
Thank you, thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay, yeah. So, how's everyone doing? My name is Kwame Braxton. I'm a visual artist. I had some culinary experience. Also, I've been doing this activism work for, I want to say, about going on 6 years now. I started like in 2018. Some of the first things I started doing as far as the art stuff was concerned was specifically trying to create programming that kind of redirected the narrative for most of the demographic here in Jackson. A lot of times, some of the artwork associated with our culture kind of creates more of a negative stigma around us. So what I did with the skill sets I had, I tried to specifically try to hone in on imagery and positive reinforcement, as well as a bit of historical references for this particular diaspora to understand. More recently, I've also kind of done a bit of lyricism, and I kind of got into music composition and kind of created my own beats and stuff, so that I can kind of create some content specifically for the next generation in associations to the hip hop era. Because right now, the main ideology behind that particular art form is that it's becoming more of a degenerate, progressing kind of thing. So what I've been doing is I kind of dipped and dabbled in animation, as well as kind of composing some music, put some stuff out specifically regarding to the climate, the socioeconomic climate down here in Jackson. Just put a song out recently going around on that one, this as well with an animation. But like I say, one of the reasons why I also do this is because I wanted to kind of create kind of a hub where most of the kids, I want to say from the age of 12 to 14, 18, the youth can kind of come and learn certain skill sets in the arts that they may not necessarily have provided in school, as well as some of the technological advances that you can incorporate in that as well. Some of the things I've done with that would be during the pandemic in 2020, I kind of learned some CAD and CAM software and kind of created some masks based off of design that I learned. Some of the programs like ZBrush and Poser, as well as Autodesk Fusion 360 kind of helped me with those. And I figured like having that introduction to those kind of tools and those kind of skill sets is something that's common. And I figured if we had more access to that, that would kind of help I guess the outlook of the culture here, and they can also kind of expand our potential. And coming from Jackson, Mississippi, a lot of people don't think we have certain limits in potentials just associated with the state in general. So those are some of the things that I kind of do, try to contribute with my work. Also, I got my start doing this kind of work, painting and doing posters and stuff for a lot of different protests. Like back in 2018, I did we did these banners for this protest we did in California. And that's kind of that was like my little introduction into kind of seeing where the impact of this work can go and how powerful it can be. And I just kind of doing it ever since.
thanks so much, Kwame, for sharing that history and your arc. I've seen some of your masks; they're super cool, and
Thank you.
and your new music too.
Yeah.
I've visited. If you have not yet, jumped online and check his new video out.
I have I could bring it, but it has some testy language. I don't know if I want to put all of it out there, So
Yeah,
I would advise I can send a link in the chat and people can go look for it for themselves in private. I don't
yeah,
want
we'd be breaking the 7 dirty words for
to.
sure.
Yes, there's a couple of words in there that I
But they're important words. They're important
words for the sense of the aesthetic. So
Yeah, the state censorship. Yeah, like I said earlier,
yeah.
we could bomb kids, but we can't say some words. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and also I would like thanks. Like I'm a dinosaur, and there's I think one more dinosaur on this panel in terms of
Yeah.
technology. So we really like this is super amazing work that you're doing, and it's
Thank you.
inspiring. So yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and have Sakura talk a little bit about the work of the Beehive, again, your arc, and the work that you do. So nice to see you again, Sakura. And I've visited with you here. You've been to campus, and it's wonderful to have you with us.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Tony. Yeah, I presented in Tony's class a decade ago, over a decade ago, 15 years ago, with some Beehive collective work. And Tony already read off our mission statement, which I have posted on the PowerPoint. So I won't repeat it, but I'll just say that, we're the Beehive Design Collective. We are known for creating these very intricate, metaphor-rich artworks that take years to create, and they tell stories about social justice issues. And we create those images through consulting impacted communities, and basically through their stories, trying to translate that into image. We are a collective of artists, activists, and educators. So not everyone in our collective is a pen and ink illustrator, though when you see our works, they are typically pen and ink illustrations, very intricately designed. I'm going to go through a bit of the evolution of us as a collective, because I think that's a bit more interesting than how I got involved, but I can go into that later if we have time. So like Kwame, we started with doing posters for events, in our style of, pen and ink illustration, and how we kind of evolved to start doing these really detailed graphic narrative pieces is we were doing a poster for the FTAA protests, originally for the one in Quebec City, though we didn't have our poster done in time. And the organizers handed us this kind of analysis of free trade. And so you can see the graphic here. The idea was that we have these three spiders representing the three forces of globalization: militarism, industrial development, and media. And then the animals getting trapped in that web are the groups of people that are negatively impacted by free trade agreements. And so right now, for folks joining us on radio, we're looking at a sheep that has a graduation cap with a carrot on a stick, and they are trapped in these chains of debt, right? Talking about one of these traps, and, of course, free trade agreements, facilitating a economic system where they really try to make education not free for the countries where it remains free. And the protesters, or resist ants, are these ants at the bottom of the graphic that have signs and puppets and, are wearing roller skates and things like that. And I'm showing this image because it's part of our evolution as a collective, because we turn this into this huge detailed poster and then blew it up and printed it out on these 20-foot wide banners. And we had the image done by the time of the FTAA ministerial in Miami. And so we were on the streets during these huge protests, and we would have these gigantic banners, and we would be using popular education to basically talk about free trade with people. But then as we toured these images around, people criticized us. They're like, well, I see you have a great analysis of what's going on, but, resistance is a lot more than just protest, And so that's when we started to, do new graphics. We started the new process of going to the area that's most impacted by whatever policy we're talking about, and interviewing people on the ground and asking them how they would want us to represent these issues. And so that's when our collective actually started talking a lot more about colonization, right? Because when we went to places like Colombia, and this graphic is called Plan Colombia. It's about U.S. foreign policy towards Colombia under the guise of the drug war. And when we went to Colombia and Ecuador, people were like, oh, this doesn't start with U.S. foreign policy. This has a 500-year history. And so here we are looking at an image of an ant. You can barely see it in the top, that's blowing a conch shell, which is to say that it's making its own, it's telling its own stories. And we see these leaves that are in the shapes of colonial ships, and these 2 wasp nests. And one is shaped like Europe, and it has all these colonizer wasps coming out of it. And it's kind of a joke, like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, but we put a Pope wasp in there just to show that it wasn't just the Protestants. And then, you know, in nature, when a wasp nest is exhausted of resources, a new nest will come out of the base of the old, and the new one looks like the United States. And there's all these larvae to represent consumption. And Plan Colombia, 500 años de terrorismo, is written in barcode font at the top. And so here you can see we're using very rich metaphors to talk about, you know, these issues such as, you know, foreign policy and military aid and things like that towards a country that was engaged in a civil war at the time, an internal conflict. And so at the center, we can see we have the leafcutter ants, who are the heroes of the story, have made their biggest cut. And we have on one side the heart of the oil industry, all these pipes and whatnot. And, you know, buried underneath the kind of ant home are these pipes and skeletons. And on the other side, we can see the word Pachakutik and these spirals representing this idea of earth time or cyclical time. And we have all of these scenes of people relating to each other in, you know, more decolonized ways, you know, telling stories by the campfire versus, you know, flipping the channel on the television screen, making coca tea for a young ant with altitude sickness versus those leaves on the other side of the image turning into dollar bills, where it's combined with chemicals to create cocaine for export. You know, one scene down here, we have native corn being grown and other plants around that native corn being harvested for its medicinal qualities. Whereas on the other side, everything that's not the GMO corn is being sprayed and killed, right, with pesticides. So this is an image from one of our listening tours that we took in Appalachia, where we were doing our research for the True Cost of Coal graphic. And that tells the story of the history of coal grounded in the stories of Appalachia. And I'm just going to quickly share a little bit about that. So, you know, we go to these communities, we show them our past works, and we ask them questions like, you know, what animal would you like to represent you? You know, they tell us stories about their history, about their struggles, about their political struggles, about the flora and fauna of the region. And we weave this all into a graphic that each graphic takes over an hour to present. So I can't do all of that work, but this one we created like a timeline. And so we start with the creation of coal in the ancient marshlands of Appalachia, and then we move up through the colonial history. Here, the settlers are represented as starling birds, European starlings, an invasive species known for kicking native birds out of their nests. And we document, you know, the industrialization, the replacement of workers by machines, as well as the labor history in the region, and our evolution to this extreme extraction of mountaintop removal, where we're flattening entire mountaintops using these gigantic machines that are 20 stories high, but only take 3 people to operate. And so the narrative takes us through the resistance, and then through the regeneration and reclamation. And so here we have a scene trying to represent land back, right? Where we're talking about, you know, creating community gardens, restoring the ecology with plants and mushrooms and using remediation methods. And then here, of course, they're tearing down the fences and walking back. And the image itself folds like a Mad magazine to create a new seamless image of just the pre-colonial past and the regenerative future, you know, trying to see our way out of this by connecting to the past. and also kind of showing how in what a short timeline we've managed to really do a lot of damage to the earth, you know, in 250 years, you know, in 40 years, when you think about, you know, these extreme extractive technologies regarding like open pit mining and things like that. Um, Anyways, and so that is one of the ways we tell stories. The timer I set for myself so that I wouldn't go over time. And so just to talk a little bit about our process, we use mind maps, and I will just end there and maybe reference the rest of my PowerPoint if a question comes up that relates to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sakura. And yes, 10 minutes, give or take. Thanks for having that. As a professor, you know, I try to do that sometimes too, and then it goes off. Thanks for not having it on. Yeah, I really thank you so much for sharing us the arc of the collective. I know some of that history as someone who was running around Miami getting shot at by rubber bullets during the FTA in Miami, and seeing the beautiful work that y'all do. The sheep wrapped up in chains, representing the student, really is impactful right now with the ways in which students are being silenced around their opposition to what's happening in Palestine. I do want to again highlight really like how you all work with the affected communities and share stories with them. They tell you, right, the conversations that you have with affected communities. They help you inform the work that you do. So it's real important work. Thanks. We're gonna move to Dana. Dana, how's your audio? You good to go, my friend?
You sound good. Do I sound good?
You sound fabulous, and you look even better, Dana. Yeah.
Thank you.
So please share with us a little bit about who you are, your arc, and what you do. And
Well, good morning, Toni and everyone. It's really an honor to be here with my fellow cultural warriors, the artists who are, you know, trying to curve our culture in a positive direction. I love that you're doing this panel right now. You know, historically, you know, artists play a very important role in culture, especially during times of crisis. And we're in a time of crisis, and that ain't going to change for a while. So for all of us artists, we're all on high alert. And for those, you know, artists who aren't on the panel who are watching this, thank you for what you do, and just keep going. I'm a guitar player and singer and songwriter, and I'm kind of half artist, half organizer. So the impact I try to have with my art is, well, one, I just, you know, try to give people a laugh, or just to feel something with the songs. And I hope my concerts or songs will help people feel their humanity and remember that we're so lucky to be alive, and the world is a beautiful place in spite of, you know, tragedies that surround us sometimes. The organizer part of myself, when I do tours, I often do a tour focusing on a certain issue. Like I've done tours to save the wolves and protect the orca, and on different indigenous rights, stop oil drilling up in the Arctic. I could go on and on and on. But the reason I love tours that focus on a certain issue is it helps get a movement moving. And people often ask me, Dana, you're preaching to the choir. Well, rule number one in organizing in my book is you have to teach the music to the choir. And in my experience, my studies, you teach the music to the choir, meaning the people who already agree with you. You bring them up to speed on a certain issue, and then they bring their circle up to speed on that issue. They educate their issue, and then you win. Basically, it's two concentric circles to hopeful victory. But so I kind of combine music with with organizing. I think of myself as a glorified cheerleader, often on my tours, whether we're trying to remove dams on the Snake River or what have you. I'll go, and during the show, I'll say, okay, this is the problem, give a few details, tell a few jokes, sing a few songs, and then this is how we're going to win. And then you kind of spell out the possibility there. And the idea is to leave people with a winning feel, because rule number one for the opposition on any of this is to make us feel like, oh, we can never win. And there's really only one rule and strategy for the powers that be, or the people who are telling us what to do. That's to divide and conquer. And if you're divided, you fall apart. And if you're united, there's a strong possibility of winning. And right now I'm on a concert tour with my new album, which is called Cracks in the Heartland. And the title track is about the Keystone XL pipeline battle, where conservative Republican ranchers and farmers teamed up with progressive environmentalists and just other citizens, teamed up with Native American activists and leaders in Nebraska and South Dakota, and fought a big oil company and the United States government and the Canadian government, and beat them. And it went on for a long time. Another song on the album talks about the dreadlock hippies in Australia, northern New South Wales, teaming up with the conservative farmers and ranchers again, people who really didn't like each other till this battle, and actually physically chaining themselves to each other, and eventually canceling all coal seam gas drilling fracking licenses in the northern part of the state. And the reason I'm so interested in these stories, and it's interesting, I went and interviewed folks in these places, similar to some of the other folks who have spoken already, because I wanted to hear what the story was. But I'm really interested in unlikely and unusual alliances. And that's a big part of really my tour from my album. Well, the theme of the album is unusual alliances, how teaming up with those people you think are very different, you have nothing in common. There's something we all have in common, and that's water. And if you look at the major fights to stop fossil fuel extraction throughout the Western United States and Canada, almost all of those fights are being led by Indigenous activists, and it's a team effort, because water, we need it for our families, we need it for economy, and people coalesce around that. So I'm kind of trying to carry that message. At my shows, I probably sing mostly to my audiences are mostly probably comprised of the progressive left. But I'm trying to sing it to them to say, hey, if we team up with those people, the rural conservative folks, on issues we agree on, we can win. And I also like doing that because I think it helps my friends and family who are Trump supporters who come to my shows. I want them to feel welcome. I want to honor the conservative people who, unknown by many of my friends and family, are leading a lot of these battles. So that's so I try to mix in the songs, the organizing, a bit of humor. And here, I'll just sing a couple songs before we move on here, but short snippets of songs. A couple songs I love to sing. These are, we can all sing along here on the computer, but Glenn Campbell's Rhinestone Cowboy. You might ask, what does like a rhinestone cowboy, I've been walking these streets so long. There's that Johnny Cash's I fell into burning ring of fire, went down, 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 and the flames went higher. Many people know these songs. These are songs of unifying. And then I often close concerts with teach your children well, their parents' hell did slowly go by. And that's what, in my mind, that's a really important part of what we artists do, as well as musicians or or painters or writers or sculptors or whatever we all are doing. I think that sums it up. Anything hop in there, Toni?
So much, Dana, for sharing that with us, and to hear your wonderful voice again. It's been a long time. I think the last time it's on a river somewhere, and you had your thumb out. You had your thumb out in the river, you know, naked as church groups were going by on a river. That's really funny. Sorry. Well, thanks, Dana. Our last guest, I'm going to ask Chris. Chris, will you share with us some of your same experiences and thoughts on art and activism in your art, please? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, greetings to all. Salam alaikum, Irini Pasi, and all that jazz. My name is Chris O'Moore, pronouns he and him. Yeah, I met Toni back in 2015-16 on Lesbos. And so I'm to share he asked me when he's asked me to talk about my art and a little bit about my story, because my art and my life and my art are basically the same thing. I mean, what I've ended up expressing as an activist, as an artist, have come from experiences which for many people would seem extreme in certain situations. And yeah, but anyway, I've lived a number of lives. Toni's met me in a couple of them, I guess, and that's just the way it is. And so let me see if I can get this up here. Just a moment, and there we go. So this is, yeah, I've described myself as a little bit of a lot in between. This is an album I released last year. It's called As I Be. As you see, and perhaps some of you have noticed, when I was first billed, I was billed under the name of Christine. I've lived 365 for a number of years as a transgender woman, and that is a part of my experience. So when I had decided to detransition for very personal reasons, which I may say some things about, but it's been important for me to also express what it has meant to be that, and this is an expression of that, seeing the different sides of a person. When you look at somebody, what do you see? And so anyway, you can check it out. This isn't an advertisement, but anyway, this is one of my expressions of that artistically, and I do that often in like album covers, different things. So this is how Toni met me, because I was about 10 years, from 2007 to 2017, an Orthodox clergyman in the Patriarchate of Constantinople. And I had lived many years on Lesbos. It's in the third largest island in Greece, where a great majority of refugees came through in 2015-16, during what some people would refer to as the refugee crisis. And so this is where, anyway, I came into a very interesting position there. Just because I had lived there, I spoke Greek, I lived there for years, and we had refugees there for years, and all the waves that came from both Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, that would come over to the island. But it really just, because of the picture of the child on the beach, it really just opened up Europe's eyes to what really was happening, even though this was almost prophesied, calculated out that something like this was going to happen and would hit Europe in a big way. And I guess in this position, I always realized that I was in a role, and I was in a role as a priest. I knew that. I would try to explain. Before becoming a priest, I have been always somewhat very theatrical or expressive. I'm quite an introvert, and I found out later that this has a lot to do with my autism. Um, ended up living at a monastery, lived in the woods for years with no electricity, off grid. Yeah, but also having this very expressive side. And anyway, I was doing audition at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London and trying to explain to them that I didn't see much difference between being an actor as a communicator and being a priest, and both roles were very theatrical. And it wasn't until years later, and this is, I think, from 2012, I would do things like this. Now, these are Roma beggars in the city. I live in Norway at the moment, though I lived in Greece for many years as well. And in the media, and it's a very conservative Christian society. And as a priest, you know, I wore this 24/7 for 10 years. Everybody could see I was a priest. But these Roma beggars, some would call them gypsies, were just, I mean, just torn apart in the comments online, in the media, by politicians. They were thieves. I mean, all these stereotypes that they've had to live with for years. And I learned their language because I'd also learned some in Greece from the Roma. I speak a number of different languages. And they became my friends, and I would try and help them out as I could. But after all this, I mean, just hate, and harassment of these people almost on a daily basis. I just decided one day to sit down with a sign, and all it says is the hand pointing next to me, and it says, "My friend." And this is one of the things I realized years later, that this was in fact performance art. And I've used a lot of religious symbolism in my art. And it was kind of around this time that I actually decided, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to art. And this is, I use symbolism. And as an Orthodox priest, a lot of this symbolism is here. But what we actually see here, and I'll show you a better picture now, is this is an installation piece, first exhibited, I think, in 2012. And this is a Roma beggar in the figure of Christ being crucified, but also pierced by ignorance and by fear. And that is so much of what this, you know, this is mixed media here. The other was an installation, but using the same idea. And I've used a lot of religious symbolism in my art. People really love this one. Love your enemies. I mean, if you say that you are going to love your enemies, if you say you're a Christian, and a lot of this is direct commentary to what I grew up. I grew up in Northern California, in well, essentially a evangelical fundamentalist cult. No television, no didn't listen to any non-Christian things, and there was just so much hypocrisy in that. And I guess I realize also that I've always questioned when you see incongruence, when you see things that don't make sense, like the difference between the rhetoric and what actually happens. Really? Love your enemies, and you're going to hate every Muslim? Could you see Christ in Osama bin Laden? And alongside of this, at some point, it was like, I just need to, as a priest, because as a priest in a very conservative church, realizing that I don't agree with a lot of this, but I will use my role to preach something. And this is my oldest child in 2015. Don't want to quite quote me on this, but I think I was one of the first publicly, one of the first Orthodox priests publicly to go in Pride parade. 2015, this ended up leading to me being defrocked, which I'm quite proud of. But I've used, so this activism just kind of came out in this role and then I've used a lot of this. This is another installation piece. This is from Lesbos, again, a crucified refugee child. These are actually taken from the shores, and you can't see all the details here, but this comes back to a story where a priest in 2015, and some of those priests are just basically fascist. I mean, horrendous, absolutely horrendous, nationalist, fascist, racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, everything. And there's pouring rain out, and there's this church, and the refugees are trying to seek coverage under like a small awning, a small roof over the front of the church, not in the church. And not only would the priest not let them in the church, he threw them out. And I was so angry, and I gathered these things. I took them back to this part of the monastery, and I thought I would be able to make this cross. I wanted to crucify this cross on the front of that priest's church in Mandamados. Shame on you, priest there. Oh my goodness. And ended up taking him, sending it back to Norway, and it's been exhibited many different places. And by the way, the whole concept of Christ or crucified, here's a recommendation: Christ or crucified, Nikos Kazantzakis. The other one is The Mermaid Madonna by Stratis Mirabellis. Christ or crucified is the reason why I became an Orthodox priest. Figure out for yourself how that worked. This is me, of course, getting arrested. There are more cops there than there are actually protesters, because I realize I do sit-ins, I do symbolic gestures that this was a protest against the proposed proposal in the Norwegian government to make it harder to seek asylum in Norway. 2016, literally sat down for less than, I think, like 10 minutes, and there were already cops there, and everybody knows who I am over here, especially at that time. And ended up speaking at the parliament, the Norwegian parliament, on that same proposal a few weeks later, and I also won an award for it. So, in the end, you win some, you lose some, and in the end you win. Again, religious symbolism, carrying Christ, Christoporos. This I mix so many different types of art. I'm not even showing you, there's so much, but this was, I was defrocked. So this is me actually holding a speech the day before I was defrocked in Paris. Paris. Sorry for the mispronunciation. And speaking against this, because I spoke for women's rights. I spoke for LGBTQ plus rights, and saying the church needs to open up and stop being so old-fashioned, using the rhetoric of love and the rhetoric of their own theology against them. And was eventually defrocked in 2017. Then in 2019, they actually tried to buy me back. I mean, this is crazy. And like I said, my art is my life, and my life is my art. They literally tried to buy me back, to bribe me, to talk to me into coming back as a priest. We still recognize you as a priest. You make such a great figure in the media. And it's like, we will pay for this and that. I'd never been paid. I got like $100 a month. I basically work for free as a priest. And and I knew what was up, and I just wrote this poem, and just like Martin Luther, put it on the front of their church, chained it on there as a gift of art. And you can read that online. Most beautiful part, if you see this, is actually when they had to smash it off with a hammer. And I don't know if that was funny, or the fact that they denied that I was even there. Anyway, here's another piece from 2021, a crucified transgender woman, African descent, Black transgender woman, pierced by misogyny, pierced by fear. It's just taking the hypocrisy of saying we love everyone and God loves everyone, and seeing the exclusion, and what can we do about it. And again, as a transgender woman, this is actually Dana. This is actually a performance piece. I do a lot of performance pieces, a lot of spoken word stuff, which I'll do one short thing in just a minute. But I mix these things. This is going from, I was asked to play the song, well, you wonder why I always dress in black. And I went from singing Man in Black to going into a poem about this patriarchy. They think they can tell you what to wear, tell you how to do your hair, tell you what you can and cannot say, make up the rules you might play in this little game with pathetic lies. And it's me as a transgender woman playing Johnny Cash and going into a radical feminist spoken word. And this is what I do. And I don't know why I do it. It feels like, and this is again, piece I've done. This is a wood print as a man. This is actually called What Do You See, as a performance piece where I actually transition, and then a follow-up piece called What Do You See 3. Been to the war in Ukraine twice as a combat medic and to do evacuations. Got some art out of this. This is just a few of them I made this last year. Therapy. Anyway. But at the end of the day, I've kind of come to that and I guess this kind of has to do with my autism, but I just question inconsistencies in rhetoric and in institutions, and almost any institution or group of people that I've ever met. I mean, you just end up, we're all complex people. I understand that. and you just go, you know what? People say things they don't mean and don't mean things they say. And maybe it's just my autism, but I have a real problem with that. And I end up pointing it out in some way. And so anyway, like to quote myself. Well, while I periodically enjoy holding on to the belief in the few religious, political, academic, and artistic voices that sincerely seem to be interested in the fight for truth and justice, I have found that the majority seems to be more interested in engaging in mutual masturbation and at times sadomasochism. So now you have my thoughts on academia. I mean, most groups of people, it's just, and living as a trans person, I mean, you see the world in so many different ways in an instant, and that's just the way it is. And there's inconsistencies in the queer community and the trans community. There's rhetoric over actual good argument, oftentimes a fight over dialogue. And, you know, I'll criticize that as well, because number one, when it comes to, for example, the trans community, what we're talking about that we need is understanding, and just that people don't really worry about the other's gender, you know. And you know, there's other issues, but a lot of it, you know, on many sides, it's happening in the volunteer community. You can again choose rhetoric over argument, rhetoric over effectiveness, rhetoric over or even just saying things that you don't do, like ideals that you don't in fact actually follow in practice. And you know, I guess that's what a lot of my art does. And but there is this goal that we have to tear down these walls, we have to tear down these hierarchies in order to create a more loving, open world that has space for the other, you know, whatever the otherness is, and seeing our common humanity. And that's what I try to express. And often it does create reactions because people don't like my mixture of symbolism, of gender, of pointing out certain things. But that's my activist. I ended up being called an activist. And then over the years realizing, oh yeah, I've actually been a performance artist for quite a long time, and I just wasn't willing to use that word. But yeah.
Thanks.
I'm just gonna, yeah. I don't know how many minutes I've used.
You're
Anybody want to tell me?
You're okay. You're over a minute, but if you wanted to share one more thing, we go for it.
One more thing, and this is kind of my art, and this is what's on my heart now, and whatever on my heart is what you hear. So this is a little poem I recently wrote.
It doesn't have any
No, it doesn't. I've checked it. I cut out the other one because I knew it had a bunch of 4-letter words, so don't worry.
Thank you.
Okay,
Came up.
here we go.
It.
Well, if love is love, if love is love, then I'm here today to ask for more understanding, that the queer community be less demanding and open their mind to the reality that you can't convert someone's sexuality. For the partner of a trans person has the right to be them. Perhaps they fell in love with a mask who turned out to be femme. 'Cause it changed their world completely overnight. And you can't flip a switch that makes it all right. Do we ask for open-mindedness while closing our eyes to the little boxes we've built that keep the other outside? I've never really liked the idea of it being us or them. But I've seen you treat as enemies the ones who are friends. And who's to tell me what gender is best? At the end of the day, you'll be just like the rest, 'cause I've seen you exclude those who've changed their mind. Well, that's arrogant, judgmental, cisphobic, unkind. We love who we love, and we love how we love, but that doesn't excuse us from whom we're intolerant of. Don't we fight for the right for all to be free? Well, Just let love be love, and I'll be as I be. Well, I guess now I'll just be a pretty good Valentina, but you can call me Chris. And I guess I agree with the neighbor children who spoke from behind the car and said, look, it's a man now. I fear none, for I'm free. I love all, for I'm free. Amen. Tack för allt.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for sharing that complex story, my friend, and really appreciate the work that you do. Yeah. So I want to move on to some questions to folks. We have a few, we have about 20 so minutes, and I want to try to get your thoughts on a few things. So we'll go around. I'd like to ask folks, artists in the past summits have highlighted how the current economic system discourages free creation, liberated creativity, if you will. It undermines the basic principle of the artist's faith in themselves at times. I want to ask, how do you navigate the tensions of both making a living and transforming the world? How do you, as artists, navigate these limitations of capitalism? And Dana's laughing. Maybe we'll start with you, Dana. I see your jolly voice there in the background.
How do you navigate art and capitalism? Well, I think it comes down to, Chris's pay rate as a priest of $100 a month. That's about right on target. I was like, oh yeah, I got paid 200. No, I think it's a very important question. I appreciate you asking that, Toni. And I think being an artist in this, in the American style capitalist culture, other capitalist countries, it's easier to be an artist. There's Canada and Europe, for musicians at least, and some others they have some programs. But if you want to do your thing, you kind of have to assume poverty. If you get lucky, you make some money. Like I do a workshop at colleges, how to make a living as an activist or an artist. And, the first thing I say is debt is a 4-letter word. Don't do it. Then you're not free. And then basically people don't want to hear this, well, some people don't mind hearing it, but basically what I say is A, have no debt. B, you got to work. If you can figure out the gig you can get paid the most for, work half time to pay your bills, have the rest for your art. But it's tough. Our capitalist society doesn't reward artists, and people think of artists as wealthy because the popular culture celebrates those folks, and that always cracks me up, but you got to have a sense of humor. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Dana. Maybe Michelle, we'll move around the room. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like Dana said, I kind of think of the big old stars that make tons of money. They kind of gained from capitalism, right? They lost what it means to make art and more of what it means to make money. And I think as an artist and an activist, which is weird because I never thought myself as an activist, and I still don't think of it that way. But it's understanding, for me as an artist, am I inspiring change? Am I constantly inspiring change? I'm really lucky, and I'm really I'm really bad at words, but I'm really lucky to be able to do this as work and make a living off of it. And that's really hard for a lot of artists. The first year I started 3 years ago doing this full time, my first year I was struggling. And I was like, why am I doing this? I was like, why am I doing this? And then I realized I'm doing it because I'm given these opportunities. I'm allowed to say what I want to say. And it's because people are kind of giving me funding to do this and say, hey, this is what I want to say. And I think I'm the best person to say that. I've also been really lucky to bring on other Native people, other people from the Black community to bring and to work with me, and I can work with them, because for filmmaking, it's a very collaborative thing. It's not just one person. I'm not the one who's making the art. It's a bunch of us. And so that's another thing that kind of motivates me and makes me realize the separation of capitalism and being an artist in America, is that like I said, these rich people, these rich artists are making it off of capitalism. Like, let's be real. Like, I don't know, diss on Taylor Swift, right? She's a smart woman, right? She knows how to make money. That's how she's a billionaire. Where all these, like, I don't know, Drake, or trying to think of names, but they're not doing it because they really love it. They're doing it because they've lost that sense of, like, how do I use my voice? And none of these people are really using their voices, right? We're noticing they're not speaking up on a lot of things right now. Like, they don't care. And so I can go on a tangent. I hope I'm making sense. But in the end, if you're an artist and you want to have a voice to your communities, is always remember, when you're making art, are you inspiring your community to change? And for me, I always remind myself, because sometimes there's days where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is hard. And then I realize, but I need to, because I need my voice heard so I can make change. And if I one day go multi-million-dollar contract to make a big budget movie, why am I doing that? Is it to cause change? Is it to cause representation? Or is it so I can make a buck and, like, forget about what I'm doing? And so if we can remember that as artists, every time, remind yourself, have a check-in. Also, artists check, because get a good therapist. It's hard. Remind yourself every month, am I inspiring people with my work? And if you are, then continue the work. If not, kind of evaluate things and be like, okay, what can I do better? Or what am I doing that's changing me? Because, yeah, I mean, I feel like this industry can change people if they don't kind of check in and be like, what am I doing? Anyways, I hope I made sense. I'll pass.
Totally did. Thank you so much for sharing that. I see a lot of the panelists nodding their head, right? Kwame, you have something to say about this? And then we'll.
Yeah. I totally agree with what Dan was saying and what Sister Michelle was saying. For me as an artist, when it comes to trying to balance the capitalist and the artist perspective of it, for me, I feel like you have to kind of first thing you have to do is quantify your time. You have to really have a certain allotted period within your life, or moments in your life where you can just create, not for the sake of just making money, but just creating for the sake of your own artistic therapy. I think that's more important. I think if as an artist, if you can value that as your economy, as opposed to if you can kind of like create that essence of creating, let that be your economy, as opposed to trying to eat off of what you make, I think it kind of balances out a little bit more, if that makes sense. Also, as far as just trying to make a living off of it, the reason why I say you're going to definitely need to do that, because there are certain realistic things that we can't get around when it comes to the allocation of resources and funds and being able to sustain yourself as an adult here. But there are also things that, well, dealing in that pushes out. Like, there are also things within the creative realm, or some internal therapeutic things that kind of take away from that. So I feel like we have to value the things that sustain us internally first as an artist, and then we can draw from that space. Because when we're creating from who we are and what we're going through. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times that emotion and stuff goes to our work. So if we're coming from a space of more of an internal fortitude, it will help translate into the work a lot better, and then it'll be received a lot more. As far as trying to make money off of it, of course, that's going to be definitely hard. That's without question. But I feel like with most artists, it's not necessarily always about the money. It's just more so about that internal need to be able to communicate your perspective in a way that someone else can understand, almost as close as you understand it. You know what I mean? That level of communication, to me, is the economy, or is the equivalent of the dollar, for an artist. And I think that's one of the things that kind of sustain us. Well, it will sustain me.
Thanks.
And then, of course, get a job and pay your bills. Of course, that too. But
Sakura, Sakura,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Thanks, Kwame.
Yeah.
So, the Beehive Collective is an all volunteer collective. So the folks engaged in the work don't get paid, though we aspire to, and most of the time we get it done, paid for people's needs while they're doing the work. So artists, while they're, kind of in almost like a retreat setting, doing the work, we try to have like the storytelling bees going around and doing shows and bringing home the honey to maintain the folks doing that work. I mean, there's a handful of people that were doing beehive work full time, and it would be supplemented by like AmeriCorps positions and things like that. But that model kind of imploded on us. We had a little bit of a colony collapse. Um, and I think, it comes partly because, when you are a volunteer organization, that had survived for like decades, um, it once you stop having the energy to recruit new folks, it can kind of, and when life catches up on you or too many people leave at the same time, it it can't like sustain itself in terms of like paying a mortgage and paying all that kind of stuff. Um, but you know, if you do kind of work it, like I participate in the Beehive as a part-time thing, and we do these grand tours and things like that on vacations, and we did a really big tour of Southeast or of the Asia Pacific region when my husband, who's a labor organizer, was on sabbatical um, for a year. Um, and so that's how we're able to do it. And then doing the Beehive work means it won't cost you, and because I was an activist beforehand, and activism always cost me money as opposed to generating money, like being able to do that much work and be that effective, and have it not cost me at all is kind of an amazing opportunity. And so we are rejigging how the Beehive is structured right now. And within the next year, we're going to start recruiting more storytellers specifically. And what we want to find is people that are embedded in the movements that our graphics are about, who are already doing the work, either paid or unpaid, doing the work. And then because we don't have any overhead anymore, we lost our headquarters and things like that. Like the founder of our collective, like, is an Uber driver half the time. And she's trying to get a poster store off the ground in Portland, Maine right now. But anyways, finding storytellers that are embedded in the movements that our graphics are about, and then using our graphics not only to do the storytelling, but also to fundraise for those front lines, for those solidarity campaigns. And then that way, the people that are engaged in the work, who are already engaged in the work, will find it generative and will actually be, like rewarded for their participation beyond just having it not cost them. It'll be a tool for them. And then that way, more of the education work will be done. What we envision is people all over in geographically dispersed areas around the US, kind of, all kind of taking ownership of maybe a handful of universities and high schools, and then maybe doing one 5-day tour a year. And doing a whole training with all those folks about how to use the graphics. In terms of the artists, lots of them are tattoo artists, not surprising, pen and ink illustration. And, what we need to do, our new model is also just fundraising ahead of time for each graphic. So we never accessed grants before, really, very, very little. Mainly, we funded the work by selling posters. And now we're trying to look into grants and having a kind of reserve of money so that we could ensure that those artists can be taken care of completely while they're doing that work, and they don't have to necessarily go on food stamps or get part-time jobs while they're illustrating the graphics. Mesoamerica Resiste took 9 years to create. So, and that's because it was a part-time job. But these graphics do take a lot of time to be created. But we're hoping that this new model will make it so that everyone engaged in it will find it beneficial, and also so that we could be most useful to social movements as well at the same time.
Wow, thanks for giving us that background on the collective, and that yeah, you sort of jump to the next question, and that is the next steps for implementing cooperative economic practices. So we want to go back, but I'll give Chris just a minute or two. You have something to say about the navigation of the economic system and art, your art?
Well, I by chance I happen to live in Norway, which compared to the United States and a lot of other places is a social democracy. So I have a general standard of living, which I don't have to really worry about. So, thumbs up for anything other than the political system in the United States at the moment, both sides included. So, and other than that, I do not make art for money. I no longer do things unpaid unless if I choose to, because I realized, oh my God, I have done so many events and so many things just free. Because if it's a good cause, any demonstration, I'm there with the sound system, and I can do that. But but yeah, as others have said, it's nice to make money off it, and I run my prices literally. It's like, no, that costs like 500,000, and I don't need my art sold. It's like I know my worth, and when I'm dead, they can buy it, whatever. They'll love my archives too. That's a whole nother type of art, but
Right. Right. Well, I'll get online and make that eBay purchase soon. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please do.
So we have about 7
Yeah,
minutes now, and I apologize for just the limited time that we have, y'all, but I really want to get to this. This is a really important question, and Sakura she nailed this question a little earlier about next steps. So one of the goals of the conference was really to make space for us to co-create next steps where we can implement cooperative economic practices in our communities. I'd like you in the next 6 minutes, if you could share with us some ideas on this topic, and then any existing networks that that we can use to implement these cooperative economic practices. And I know that's a big lift and 6 minutes, so maybe like a minute and a half for each of you, if you have anything to add for that. So who would like to start? I'll let you. Dana, do you have anything on that? Any ideas on that?
Cooperative tell me what that means.
Well, like, how do we work together as artists, right? To support one another and find ways to do that outside of maybe the nonprofit industrial complex.
I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, what I do, and I suspect all of us do, is, well, Pete Seeger was a mentor and role model of mine, and he would literally, all the people's songs they sent to him, he would go ice skating and listen to it on his Walkman. But he basically he took time. He took time with any artist who needed some help, who approached him. And it's not economic per se, but that's, in this crazy culture, I think that's just a very simple thing. And I'll put it out there for the artists who are watching this. If they have questions for me, you can contact me at dana@cowswithguns.com, and I'll try to answer any questions. But
great. See, Chris?
Yeah, springboarding off of that. I mean, it's not the economic thing, but it is just like lifting up other artists that you see they have a message or a quality, and maybe they need help, or they just need to. It's like, it just exposure, but it's like actually like giving them faith, giving them trust, and I think that just builds up when other people, like other artists who have been like recognized, are like, no, you're an artist, and them saying that to me has helped me. It has inspired me to move on, and it it doesn't even almost have an economic thing you can calculate out, but it is so important to lift up, to, oh, I can't even remember all these phrases in American English, to speak them forward. Yeah, too many languages, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, to lift them up. Yeah.
Michelle?
I would say collaborate with each other, because like there's something I can't do and I'd love to collaborate with you all or other artists. And I think another thing is guide, and I'm not gonna say the younger generation, because there's so many people in different ages who are deciding to do art. Just kind of mentoring them, because in this like artist realm, we pass it down, and I think that's something we all have skills that we can pass down, not to the next generation but to the next artist, and guide them and say, hey, it's okay, you're doing good, you're gonna do it, you're gonna make it, and kind of reassuring artists that we're gonna make it. I mean, when you think about it, we're always here, we're always gonna be here. They try to get rid of us all of the time, and we're like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen. We're gonna hear our voices and let you know what we feel. But if anything, just guide people, mentor them. If they ask for help, the step to ask someone, hey, can you guide me, is really hard. And so they feel comfortable enough to ask you for that advice, and kind of take that as an honor and be like, okay, well, how can I help you in that?
Wame? And then we'll close with Sakura.
I'm totally on board with what everybody is saying. I agree with that 100%. I think the most impactful thing we can do as artists is to maximize our skill sharing capabilities. I think one way we could probably, I think one of the ways we could probably build on that is hold more workshops, hold more think tanks, have more artist to artist interaction, as far as basically exchanging what we know, showing what mediums we can work with, and taking stuff to the different level. That's one of the things I've experienced, particularly doing this kind of work. Like the level of advancement I've had just being around certain people who are, in that same kind of trajectory of where I'm trying to go with stuff. It helps you a lot better. And then you pick up things on osmosis. I would say the most important thing though is us learning how to interpret each other's expression without internalizing it negatively, reverberating back negative interpretations. I think a lot of that and just purely from an artist to artist perspective, because sometimes artists come in at various different levels, and depending on the experience you have with that artist, it can either discourage or reinforce what that person's trying to build artistically. So I think those are one of the most important things, while we're like being mindful of how we're transferring these skills to other creators, because it creates a ripple effect. And as artists, we can kind of generate the aesthetic of how people think for the current time. That's what I believe. I just see how we create ideas and people absorb it. And I mean, I think that those things kind of ripple, but I don't want to talk over this. This is what I think we can kind of do.
Thank you, Kwame. And we'll leave the last for Sakura. Please share with us your thoughts.
Sure. Well, this is kind of a pragmatic tip, but realizing that so many movement artists do make money through touring, musicians, or Beehive Collective is one of a few visual artists that make a lot of money through touring. So, supporting that, and, like putting together like local shows for the touring act, it usually is, a huge boost to a local scene as well, to get people from the outside and encouraging that networking. In terms of networks, I would love, if there were more that anyone's aware of, but like networks of like rad professors, or these sorts of things, like that would be really helpful if someone put that together, so that we could like more easily get out there, especially art with a political edge. Oftentimes, like it's just really good to have those resources, and it's really hard. You're so isolated. It's not like these things are publicized out there. We often look at the back of a slingshot when we're touring internationally, to look at all the different movement spaces back there. As our first step to get into a community, and then someone that has like a connection at the university, you have someone that has a connection with the protest movement. Maybe there's a protest going on that we could like put our banners up at. So I don't know, that's kind of what I would love as a task for everybody and ourselves to share with each other. I know that whenever like folks asks me, because they knew I toured somewhere recently, I try to hook them up with like whatever venues we talk to, and contacts and things like that. But that could be really helpful because it's just overwhelming, the amount of logistics that you have to deal with, besides doing art.
Thank you. Yes. In my mind, I see this 3-day art, culture, music, politics festival, and you all come and we all spend 3 days, living together and working on that. So I think I'll try that up here and up here in Humboldt. So I want to thank you all of you incredible culture workers and artists and just generally great humans, for taking the time to have this discussion and for sharing your thoughts and wisdom on the work that you do on activism in the future. Thank you all for what you do and what you've shared tonight. I'm going to close and let you all know that the next session is going to be starting in 30 minutes. And that next session is decolonization in the law. The legal system serves as society's framework. It defines norms, resolves conflicts, sets standards for behavior, and maintains order. The law shapes social values and structures power dynamics. So we're going to have a panel that questions the very framework of our current legal system. And there'll be a panel of legal scholars that are going to ask the question, can we use the law to dismantle structures of oppression and colonization? And can we use the law to create equitable and sustainable systems? So I hope folks can join us, take a break and join us. And again, thanks again to all the panelists. This will be on Free Speech TV. It's recorded and it'll be up online. Please, folks, and listening and watching, reach out to these artists here and culture workers and connect with them. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, y'all. Thanks again. Thank you, everyone.